Hello, EDC 220 Parent-Family School Interaction class. This is an overview of week 5. This video is posted as well as the PowerPoint slides. There are several videos embedded within this presentation that I encourage you to view. So as we go along, we'll just do a little head count and I'll encourage you to watch at least 2 or 3 of them, okay? All right, so week 5 class was canceled, and I appreciate your questions and comments and checking in with me as well this week. You had several assignments that were extended until 10 o'clock on Thursday the 11th. This hopefully afforded you a little bit more time to work on your website as well as your group presentation, your open house presentation, and even use class time for your parent-teacher mock conference recording. This video is going to go over chapters 9, 10, and 12, and I ask that you please read chapters 11 and 14 in preparation for our week 6 meeting on Thursday, the 18th of February. Week 6 and 7 is going to cover modules 6 and 7. So you do have 4 more chapters of reading. Week 6 brings you to completing the current events mixtape by Thursday, as well as your Stewards of Children certificate. We've been talking about this for several weeks. Remember, it is several hours of time in order to complete that, but you do have the option to hit pause if necessary. And then your advocacy plan workshop and resource file will be due Sunday the 21st. As always, if you have questions, concerns, or suggestions, you are encouraged to contact me. That can be email, phone. Make sure you leave a message if you call, and we could always schedule a Zoom meeting as well. Okay. We're going to start with chapter 9. Just a reminder to always begin with the learning objectives, and remember there's a summation at the conclusion of each chapter. So chapter 9 talks about the different family involvement models, and there are 4 primary models specific to special education. And so the first one is family-centered intervention. So this shifts intervention efforts to a family-oriented approach. So you're working with the families, right? You're not talking at them, you're not presenting stuff to them, you're working with them. So this is a hand-in-hand approach. The preschool model, family-centered preschool model, the families actually become or placed in a consultant role, right? Parents of exceptional children serve as support staff in the classroom and are also liaisons between families and the center or school, right? So experienced family members of exceptional learners become consultants and a support person, liaison between new families, right, and the school or center itself. Parent-educator model. This is a statewide program that employs parents as professionals in one state's early intervention system. And again, this module, as you're looking at these different models, think about the pros and cons of each. Right? There's 4. The last one is parent-to-parent model. And this is when parents of exceptional children serve as a resource to other parents and professionals. So if you're familiar with the Parent Information Center, what we call PIC, the parent-to-parent model is employed for several, and their staff are special educators as well. So there's a dual model happening there. Again, think about the pros and cons. If you had your choice, if I were to say which of these 4 models would you prefer to be an educator in, that's another perspective and consideration. Chapter 10 talks about educational law and parental rights. I just want to pause and remind you, I'm never going to ask or exam you on dates or public law numbers and those things, right? So you don't need to memorize some historical timeline or public law numbers for IDEA, for example. All right, so this overview really has you looking at the different reflections in the chapter highlights. The first one is the reflection on 215. It talks about and asks you to consider whether children should have to attend school, why or why not, what types of school exist in the community where you grew up or where you currently live, what impact has the No Child Left Behind Act had on schools in your community. And again, I encourage you to think about that box that we've continued to talk about, right? How does this affect children, their families, educators, the community itself? Another reflection is a very common scenario that's discussed, and that is one of having the Christmas concert and having various religions within the school or center and how you would manage that, right? So how do you broaden the scope and take it from Christmas to winter? A lot of centers and schools have gone from Halloween to fall festivals and from Christmas concerts to holiday concerts, or in some cases, no concerts, right? So not celebrating specific to a holiday or even something like Valentine's Day, but getting a little bit more broader. Okay. Another one of the reflections talks about school violence, including the use of weapons, and what rights do school personnel have. School personnel being everybody from facilities to the secretaries or administrative assistants to the teaching staff and administration. Also think about what constitutes a weapon, because in reality, scissors and a sharp pencil are a weapon. But it'd be interesting to look up the school district where you're currently living and see, do they have a policy about weapons in school? What is that policy? Are children expelled? Are children suspended? Is it in school suspension? Is it out of school suspension? What happens when people bring a weapon into the school? Is it the same for kindergartners as it is in high school? So, when we're talking about weapons and these policies, does it matter if it's elementary, middle school, or high school? Again, thinking about the children, thinking about the educators, and again, where the school sits. Moving on to Chapter 12, which is poverty. Again, review the learning objectives. I would like you to take time to review at least 2 of the 3 following chapter highlights. There's 2 reflections and a case study. I've included the page numbers for you. This How is Poverty Measured is a video out of the University of Wisconsin at Madison, and it talks about how the United States has charted poverty in this country. How is it measured in this country? So there's different types of poverty. Situational poverty, generally caused by a sudden crisis or loss, and it is often temporary. Things like COVID, illness, unemployment. Generational poverty is 2 generations of a family that's been born into poverty, right? They're not equipped with the tools to move out of their situations. Now, tools is a broad topic, right? So think about what tools would they need? The video Blueprint for Reducing Generational Poverty, it happens to come out of Ohio, but it's a really great video that talks about what this community has decided needs to be their action plan and the involvement on a lot of different levels within the community to make it happen. Absolute poverty, which is super rare in our country. It involves scarcity of such necessities as shelter, running water, and food. And absolute poverty would be consistent scarcity of these items. So the focus is really on day-to-day survival. Relative poverty refers to the economic status of a family whose income is insufficient to meet its society's average standard of living. Standard average of living. The next slide goes over U.S. poverty rate, so you can look at that. And again, you can always Google what is economic standards. Now, the economic and society averages obviously are going to vary. So, for instance, we're talking about increasing minimum wage to $15. Well, $15 is not the same in Wilmington, Delaware, that it is in New York City, or that it is in Whitewater, Wisconsin, which is a teeny tiny pin dot rural town in Wisconsin, right? So just to take it a little bit more global, the UNICEF video, what is multidimensional child poverty, kind of expands and contracts the above definitions and has you thinking at a different level. Some of those tools that we talked about with the families. If you want to learn more, again, I encourage you to look at table 12.1 that's titled, What is your knowledge about poverty? Cover up the answer key. Do yourself a favor, answer with your gut, right? And go back. I'm always, for me, as many times as I've taught and taken that quiz, it is a reality check. The 2018 poverty rates for our country are available for you to view, and they are broken down by state. And then the poverty experience is something that our DSEA here in Delaware often does, and is a wonderful experience. And it basically puts you in a scenario. You're put into small pods, and you're given a scenario. So you're given a family structure, you're given an income structure, situational things like housing, jobs, etc. And so you're looking at all of those things, and then again looking at the tools that would help you either maintain or raise your level, so that you're more comfortable, living more comfortably. Right? Again, a lot of these things are situational as to where you're living in this country. So think about where you were raised or where you're currently living. Chapter 12 talks about working with children, Chapter 12 is working with families, and continuing to talk here about low-income families. I personally think you should just take low income out of this equation, and if you look at this list, think about it as check your attitudes. Know the environment in which your children live, right? I understand that this chapter is focusing on low-income families and specifically working with families on a broader level. But if you take low income, these are things that we really should be doing with all of our children and families. Some characteristics of homelessness in the United States. Mom is statistically in her late 20s, has 2 children on average. Adults in many homeless families work. 42% of children in homeless families are under the age of 6. That's 4 out of 10. So if you're in a preschool classroom of 4, 5, 6-year-olds, that means 4 out of 10 have the potential to be homeless. And again, these statistics ebb and flow depending on where you are in the country. 84% of our families experiencing homelessness are female-headed, and more than half of all homeless mothers do not have a high school diploma. So again, we talk about systemic concerns like education. How can you support your children and students? Don't stigmatize children who are in homeless situations. Again, much of the time you won't even know that they're homeless. Make schools a safe place. When we talked about the 3 R's, make sure school is respectful, responsive, reciprocal. You're listening to the children, right? All that comes with those 3 R's. Think about meeting the needs of the whole child. Work with the parents and guardians to develop concrete goals and plans to address the needs of the children and the family, and reach out to the community. Right? How can you get involved? All right. Again, if you have questions, bring them to class this coming week. Okay. Let's talk about these chapters in a little bit more depth. If you have questions, suggestions, thoughts. Right? Thank you again for your understanding from week 5. Just a reminder, heading into week 6, we will meet on Thursday the 18th. We'll be looking at your parent-teacher conference simulations together, and we will review chapters 11 and 14. I hope everybody's doing well, and I very much look forward to seeing you on Thursday. Take care, everybody.